The microdial tapering jig is fully functional, allowing for 1, 2, 3, 4, even 8-sided tapers if that's what you're looking for. Starting with a clean straight blank, mark where you want the tapers to start. Especially on multi-sided tapers, it's important to make sure that all the tapers start in the same place. With the angle set as desired, slide the rip fence over until the blade contacts the part right at your cut line. Leg blanks are far too narrow to cut without some holding mechanism, and the microdial tapering jig is specifically designed to use your gripper system to hold your parts in place. The right angle stabilizing leg easily attaches to the jig, and then your gripper attaches to the stabilizing leg. I've found it easier to initially set the gripper up high, put the part in place against the jig, and then lower the gripper down onto it for a snug fit. Notice that I'm making a quick test pass just to make sure that everything's going to clear the blade and not make contact. I don't want my gripper hanging out in space on the outside edge of the part, so I'm going to add the spacer blocks to the outside of my gripper. The spacer block is not tall enough to reach the tabletop with this size leg, so I'm going to need a shoe underneath it so that it contacts the table firmly. A couple of screws keep the shoe in place. Be sure of your setup, check for clearance, and cut your first taper. When tapering two adjacent sides, the first cut is exactly the same as we just showed. The jig remains set the same for the second cut, but the gripper is going to need to be adjusted because your part now rests on the table at an angle that you just cut. The trailing edge of your gripper is now down at an angle, so be sure to check the clearance again before you make your cut. Now your leg is perfectly tapered on two adjacent faces. With two adjacent faces tapered, cutting the third and fourth faces is going to require a reset of the jig. The tapered face riding against the jig negates the angle of the jig, and so the angle needs to be doubled in order to make the next taper cut. The first two sides of the leg were tapered at 2 degrees, so now I'll set the jig for 4 degrees of angle, and reset the rip fence as before. With the jig and the rip fence reset, my gripper should just go right back into place with minimal adjustment, if any needed at all, in order to hold the leg securely. But I still need to check for clearance with the blade. And the remaining two sides of the leg can be tapered. Now here's an interesting trick that may not have occurred to you. By laying your blade over at 45 degrees, resetting the height, and resetting the jig, you can actually cut 8-sided tapers now. Make sure that your gripper is properly adjusted so that it holds the leg securely. You're going to want to increase the angle a little bit, and again, check for clearance. Because the blade's set to 45 degrees, now you're just going to cut the sharp point off of your corners, forming an 8-sided tapered leg. Adjusting the angle of the jig and the position of the rip fence will allow you to cut many different 8-sided details. If your router table has enough clearance, you can even create some flute detail on the ends of your legs. Again, we've set up to pass just the corner of our leg over the top of the router bit. A round nose bit, set so it cuts no deeper than half of its own width, will give you an excellent fluted result. And of course, larger bits will give you larger flutes. 1 taper or up to 8. It's all up to you with the microdial tapering jig.